Alright, this lesson is on dividing polynomials. So before we start dividing algebra dividing, we're just going to do numeric dividing, maybe what you did in elementary school, who knows. So what's 101,952 divided by 59? How would you set it up and how would you divide? I know it's been a long time. So what you're dividing by goes on the outside. What you're dividing into goes underneath. And then your answer is going to be on top. And what we do here is we look at the numbers inside and divide it over what's in front. So I need a number bigger than 59. So I'm going to start with 101. So 101 divided by 59. So without going over, it only goes in once. And then 1 times 59 is 59. You put it underneath the 101 and then subtract. And you get 42. Bring down the next number. How many times does 429 divided by 59 without going over? That's 7. Go 7 times 9 is 63. Carry the 6. 7 times 5 is 35 plus 6 more. It's 41. It's 413. Bring down the next number. How many times without going over? 59 into this. 2. So if I double that, it's 18 and carry the 1, 10, one more. It's 118. Subtract. 47. Bring down the 2. Again, how many times? 7, right? Like before, or is it 8? I think it goes up to 8. So that's 2 and 40 and the 7 more. Oh, it goes in evenly. There you go. 1,721. No remainder. How about this one? Divide it using long division. So 13 into 54 without going over is 4 times. That's 52. That gives you a subtract to find the remainder. That, and there is twice. It goes in evenly. 7, again, 0, because it's smaller than what you're dividing by. So the remainder is 7. So you have 420. Now here's an important part. What do you do with the remainder? Now sometimes you've been taught to write down R7. But a better way to write the remainder is as a fraction. So what's left over? Well, this remainder is actually the numerator, and what you're dividing by is the denominator. And so what you're left with over is actually a fraction. So it's 420, and what you're left over, the remainder is 7 over 13. All right, now we're going to use this similar technique to do long division with polynomials. So let's go. So x minus 2 is on the outside of the house. Underneath will be the polynomial x squared plus 4x squared. Subtract 16x plus 8. So there's the setup. To divide this, we're actually going to take the leading term over the leading term, kind of the power term divided by the power term. So inside, what we're dividing into, the leading term, the first one, the power term is x cubed. So on the side, we're going to go x cubed divided by the power term of the divisor, which is x. So just first term over divided by first term. And when you divide this, you're just subtracting the exponents. So you get x squared. And then we're going to distribute. So x squared times x is x cubed. And x squared times negative 2 is negative 2x squared. We're then going to subtract to find the remainder. So the x cubes eliminate. 4 subtract a negative. Be careful. When you subtract a negative, you're adding. So 4 plus 2 is 6. And then you bring down the next term. And we're going to do this again. Now, what's the leading term? Now, of the remainder, what's the power term? So it's 6x squared. And again, I'm going to divide it by the same thing, which is x from the divisor. When you divide this, notice 6 divided by 1 is 6, and subtract the exponents, and you get 6x. Now you're going to distribute. So 6x times x and 6x times negative 2. We're going to subtract. Notice the 6x squares will eliminate. Be careful of subtracting a negative. You're adding. So negative 16 plus 12 is negative 4x. Bring down the last term. Again, we're going to divide. Negative 4x divided by x. That gives me negative 4. I'm going to distribute. And negative times a negative is plus 8. There is no remainder. They eliminate. And your answer is above here. That's called the quotient. All right, let's try again. Can you do long division with me? So we have x plus 4 divided into, that's the divisor. This is called the dividend, what we're writing underneath. And to do the divide, we take the leading term divided by the leading term. So in other words, 3x cubed divided by x. Power over power. When I divide it, I get 3x squared. Distribute, you get 3x cubed. And then what's 3 times 4 is 12. And it's 12x squared. Subtract. So the 3x cubes eliminate. 2 subtract 12 is negative 10x squared. Bring down the negative 37x. I'll look at that. Thank you and thank you. Nope. I'll see you soon. Next, you're going to take negative 10x squared and divide it by x again. When I divide it, I'm left with negative 10x. Distribute, and you get negative 10x squared. So that means negative 10x times x and negative 10 times 4. Again, be careful about subtracting negatives. So the negative 10s will eliminate, but negative 37 plus 40 gives me positive 3x. Bring down the 12. Again, 3x divided by x. That gives me just 3. And then distribute. That's 3x and 12, which means there's no remainder. Divide again. 2x plus 7 into 2x cubed plus 5x squared. Subtract 19x. Subtract 42. Take the first term. I'll do it right here. 2x cubed divided by 2x. So the first term divided by the first term. 2 divided by 2. Subtract the exponents. Gives me x squared. Distribute. Subtract. Bring down the next term. So again, now we have negative 2x squared divided by 2x. That gives me negative 1x. Take the negative x and multiply both. Make sure when you subtract a negative, you're aware of it. So when you subtract a negative, you're adding. So it's negative 19 plus 7. Bring down the last term. And it's negative 12x divided by 2. That gives me negative 6. Again, distribute. Negative times a positive, you get negative 42. So when you subtract that, the remainder is 0. X squared plus 8. X to the 4th plus 3x cubed. Plus 4x squared plus 24x minus 32. All right. So I start with x to the 4th divided by x squared. That just gives me x squared. Distribute. Be careful here. X squared times 8 is 8x squared. I'm going to put that underneath so we have like terms. So the x-4s, they eliminate. I still have 3x cubed, and then 4 take away 8 is negative 4x squared. You can bring down the next term, 24x. Take 3x cubed and divide it by x squared. That gives me 3x. Distribute, you get 3x cubed. 3 times 8 is 24, but it's 24x. So I make sure like terms are underneath each other. So when I subtract, the x cubes eliminate. Negative 4, subtract nothing, is negative 4x squared. And the x's, the 24x's eliminate. Bring down the last term, which is negative 32. So take negative 4x squared divided by x squared. That gives me negative 4. So that's negative 4x squared, and negative times a positive, negative 32. And again, when I subtract, the remainder is 0. The answer is right there on top, x squared plus 3x minus 4. All right, turn the page. What happens when the remainder is not 0? How do we write that? And that's that understanding that if we have a remainder, we have to write it as a fraction at the end. So we'll do that. So let's see if we can do the dividing here. I wonder if we can do some of the dividing without writing it down, always. So what's 3 divided by 1? That's 3x squared when you subtract the exponents. When I subtract, I get a remainder of 4. Bring down the 2x. What's 4 divided by 1? It's going to be 4x. And 4x times 1 is 4x. Be careful subtracting here. I get a remainder of negative 2x. Bring down the last term, 3. What's negative 2 divided by 1? And that gives me negative 2x, and negative 2 times 1 is negative 2. So when I subtract this, remember when you subtract a negative, you are adding. I get a remainder of 5. So how do I write the answer down? So on top of the divide sign, the answer is 3x squared plus 4x, subtract 2. The remainder of 5 gets written as a fraction. Well, the 5 is the numerator. Remember, the denominator is what I'm dividing by, which is x plus 1. 8. So 6 divided by 3 is 2x squared. Get the remainder. Remember, when you subtract a negative, you're adding, so it's going to be negative 9. Negative 9 divided by 3 is negative 3x. Negative 3 times negative 2 is positive 6. So 12 take away 6 is 6. 6 divided by 3 is 2. So 2 times 3 again is 6x. 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. If you're doing it right, the first terms will always eliminate. And then the next column will give you a remainder. Now when you subtract a negative, you're adding. So 6 plus 4 is 10. That's it. So the answer is 2x squared minus 3x plus 2. The remainder is written as a fraction. Done. Number 9. So set it up. One divided by 1. Just subtract the exponent. So it's x squared. Now distribute. So x squared times x squared. Be careful you line up like terms here. So x squared times negative x is negative x to the 3. That's adding the exponents. And negative 5 times x squared is negative 5x squared. Make sure that you subtract properly. So the x to the 4th, remember the first column will always eliminate if you do it right. We're adding here. So negative 5 plus 1 And then 1 plus 5 is 6. Bring down the next term. What's negative 4 divided by 1? That's negative 4x. Multiply. Subtract to find the remainder. Notice the negative 4's will eliminate. 6 take away 4 is 2. Notice the 20x's also eliminate. So we just have 2x squared. The last thing to bring down is negative 10. I left a little gap there on purpose. What's 2 divided by 1 is 2. So 2 times x squared is 2x squared. 2 times negative x is negative 2x. And 2 times negative 5 is negative 10. So the reason there's a gap is I needed to have like terms underneath each other. So 2x squared subtract 2x squared, they eliminate. Nothing subtract negative 2. Well, when you subtract negative 2, you're adding. And then the negative 10s, they eliminate because they subtract. So what I'm left with is 2x. So when I write the answer, it's x squared minus 4x plus 2. And then the remainder gets written as a fraction. So 2x is the numerator, and what I divided by, the divisor, is x squared minus x. Subtract 5. Number 10. What happens when we're missing a term going down? Like a missing power. So when x to the 4th, we have no x cubed. What do I do with that? So let's start the dividing. And if we're missing a term, it's essential that you put a 0 in its place. So how many x cubes are there if you don't see them? So I see no x cubed. So how many are there then? If there's none, I see 0. And that's not whatever. That is necessary when you divide. And then I have negative 64x squared. I have 9x and negative 80. Nothing else was missing. So again, I'm going to go 1 divided by 1 and subtract the exponents. And then 0 subtract negative 8 gives me positive 8x cubed. 8 divided by 1 is 8, and subtract the exponents. Subtract, they all eliminate, so I bring down everything that's left over. 9x subtract 80. 9 divided by 1 is 9. And then 9 times negative 8 is negative 72. Make sure you subtract the negative properly. So the 9x's, they eliminate. We're adding 72, so that gives me negative 8. So I write it properly as x cubed plus 8x squared plus 9, and then the fraction, which is 8 over x minus 8. Oh, let me make sure you see it. So I wrote down the answer. And then the remainder I wrote as a fraction. So if it's negative, you are subtracting. If it was a positive remainder, you'd be adding. And then the denominator is always what you divide it by, the divisor. The only way we get stronger is by practicing. It might be that you need to take a break and then come back and practice some more, and not try to practice for 2 hours or whatever, or an hour or whatever it would take you. That you practice in little chunks. Let's set this up. I'm noticing I'm missing an x. So if I have no x, I put in 0x and then the 4. And then I divide. 12 divided by 1 is 12, and subtract the exponents. And then multiply. 4 take away 12 is negative 8. Bring down the 0x. Negative 8 divided by 1 is negative 8x. When you subtract the exponents, that's negative 8x squared and negative 8x. When you subtract a negative, it's positive. Bring down the last one, 4. 8 divided by 1 is 8. So 8x plus 8, subtract, gives me negative 4. So how do you write that answer at the end? We have 12x squared minus 8x plus 8, and then we write the remainder. Subtracting, 4 is the numerator, and x plus 1 is the denominator, what you divide it by. All right, next page. Sometimes there's an easier method to divide if the situation is correct. And so that easier method let's see. Sometimes it says, how can division be used to factor polynomials? So let's see, what number did we just do? Maybe I'm getting mixed up here. So we're at 11. Let's get to 12. There it is. Ha. All right. So as I was saying, sometimes if the situation's right, we can set this up easier and use what's called synthetic division. Now, synthetic division means that we only use the coefficients. Now, this only method can only be used if our divisor has to be a simple linear. And that means the leading coefficient for the linear is 1. So, in other words, if what I'm dividing by is just x plus or minus a number, we can use synthetic. If the degree is more than x, like x squared or x cubed, can't do it. If it said 2x minus 1 or any other number but 1 in front of x, you cannot do it. So when can you use synthetic division is when the divisor is simple and linear, and that means that you would change the sign here. Anyways, so this is simple linear, and now we can use synthetic division. So how does that work? So let's start. First, what you're dividing by, you do the 0. So we'll see how many people come in here in announcements. We're in nutrition break. It's actually the last day of school for 2019. All right, so negative 4. So what did I do to start with? I took the divisor and did the 0. Next, I did an upside down divide sign, or like a big L. And then inside, what I'm going to do is just put down the coefficients. So how many x cubes do you have? 1. How many x squares do you have? Negative 1. How about how many x's? Negative 27. And then we have negative 28 by itself. You can sit down. No? Okay. Now, once I have it set up, I'm simply going to add and multiply. So 1 plus nothing is 1. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. And then I add. Negative 1 and negative 4 is negative 5. And then I multiply. A negative times a negative is positive 20. Add. Multiply. Now, the last column gives you your remainder. So you can see the remainder is 0. So how does this help me factor? Well, if you look at this, or how does this help me divide? What's the answer? I want you to see that we have 1, negative 5, and negative 7. That these numbers that you see are coefficients for my final answer. So I was dividing into x cubed, and when it's synthetic division, you go 1 degree less for your answer. So in other words, we have 1x squared, we have negative 5x, and negative 7, and that's the answer. That's using synthetic division. Let's try it again. So we're dividing by x subtract 2. So what's the 0 of this divisor? Positive 2. You draw a big L, And then we use only the coefficients, which are 3, negative 22, 37, and negative 10. So I'm going to add the column. So 3 plus nothing is 3. And then I'm going to multiply. So 2 times 3 is 6. And then I'm going to add. So negative 22 plus 6 is negative 16. I'm going to multiply. That's negative 32. I'm going to add. That's 5. 2 times 5 is 10. And notice the remainder is 0. So again, the numbers you see underneath are my answers, but they're the coefficients. They need the algebra attached to it. So if I'm dividing into x cubed, then my answer will be x squared, then x, then the constant. That's using synthetic division. Now I'm going to do that again. And understand that if there's a remainder, I need to write the remainder as a fraction. So I have negative 5, that's the 0. I do a big L. I have 1x cubed, 1x squared, negative 22x, and just negative 1. So no variables. I'm going to add, so 1 plus nothing's 1. And then I'm going to multiply. So negative 5 times 1. I'm going to add, I'm going to multiply, all the way across. Now I always box out the last one to remind myself that's the remainder. So in this case, the remainder is 9. So we have 1x squared, negative 4x, negative 2, but then we have a remainder. And it's a positive remainder, so we're adding. That's the numerator. And what we divided by is x plus 5, and we have our answer. Number 15, set this up. So the 0 of what we're dividing by is positive 3. Big L. How many x cubes? 4, then negative 16, then 20, then negative 16. Add the first column, multiply, and keep adding and keep multiplying all the way across. Notice there's a remainder of 8. So this answer is 4x squared minus 4x plus 8, and then the remainder is positive as a fraction. And the denominator is what you divide by. Number 16. Notice in this case we have negative 8. We have 1x cubed. We have no x squared, so we make sure there's a 0 there. Negative 49x, so we have negative 49 and then 120. So we're going to add and then multiply. Notice in this case we have no remainder. I'm getting 64 by multiplying. I'm getting negative 120 by multiplying 8 times 15. No remainder, so the answer is 1x squared minus 8x plus 15. Number 17, the 0 is positive 9. X to the 4th, we have 1. X cubed, we have negative 9. No x squares, no x's, and negative 1. We're going to add and then multiply. So 1 plus nothing is 1. Multiply, then add, multiply, add, multiply, add, all the way across. And notice the remainder here is negative 1. So what's our answer? Well, notice what we divided into was x to the 4th. Subtract 1 from the exponent, and you get 1x cubed. And the remainder is negative 1. And that's going to be over the divisor, which is x minus 9. All right, turn the page. How can division be used to factor a polynomial? So we're going to divide this and use that to help us factor things out here. So let's do what we just did. So we're dividing by x subtract 4. That's the factor that we know. So we're going to divide by that. So it's going to be positive 4. And it's going to go into x cubed. We have negative 5x squared, positive 2x, and positive 8. We're going to add and then multiply. Notice we have no remainder. So what's left over is 1x squared minus x minus 2. Now, that can be factored using negative 2 and positive 1. We knew the original factor was x minus 4. So now, all together, what is that function in factored form? So we have x minus 4. We took the answer and factored it, and then put them all three factors together to write it in factored form. All right, number 18. Let's try that. First, dividing. Notice we have no x squares. Add and then multiply. What's left over is x squared plus 7x plus 12. So that factors. So what two numbers multiply to 12 and add to 7 are 3 and 4. And then if I go back to the beginning, we knew x minus 7 was a factor, and then I just joined them up with positive 3 and positive 4. All right, let's try it again. Negative 3. Add and then multiply. What I'm left with is 2x squared minus 9x minus 5. Know that 2 times negative 5 is negative 10, and negative 9. The two numbers that would fit here are negative 10 and 1. And then if I factor by grouping, I factor out a 2 and an x, I get x minus 5. Again, factor out negative 1, I get x minus 5. So altogether I get x minus 5 and 2x minus 1. Now to that, I join it up with the factor I knew from the beginning, which is x plus 3, and now the function's in factored form using division. All right, two more. So 2x plus 5, I cannot use synthetic division. So I have to use long division because it's not as simple linear. So 6 divided by 2 is 3x squared, and then multiply, subtract, bring down the next one. Negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 7, multiply. Make sure you're careful with subtracting the negative here. That's positive 8x. Bring down the 20. So 8 divided by 2 is 4. Notice we have no remainder here. So what's left over, I'm going to factor this over here. 3 times 4 is 12 and negative 7. The numbers are negative 3 and negative 4. So I have 3x squared, and I take out the negative 7 and put in negative 3 and negative 4. And then factor out what I see. So I have 3x, x minus 1, and negative 4, x minus 1. So I see what they have in common, x minus 1, and we have a 3x minus 4 left over. So altogether, what would the function look like? So I have the x minus 1, the 3x minus 4, and what I began with, which is 2x plus 5. All right, one more left. So this one I can do synthetic because it's a simple linear. So positive 1, I use the 0. I have 2x to the 4, so 1x cubed, negative 11, x squared, negative 4x and 12. So add and then multiply all the way down. The remainder is 0. What I'm left with here is 2x cubed plus 3x squared minus 8x minus 12. I can factor this by grouping. So factor out a 2x, you have x plus 3. Factor out a negative 4. Oh no, just factor out an x, and you're left with 2x plus 3. Factor out a negative 4, and you have 2x plus 3. So you have 2x plus 3, x minus 4, and then the factor we were given at the beginning, which is x minus 1.
That's 8. That's for 8.
So then you have the three factors that we have. So there's the lesson on dividing and factoring and long division and synthetic division. Do you want to say goodbye? You sure? They heard you?
Goodbye.
All right. Mr. G Math, over now.